Welcome to my channel. Thank you for watching me. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the new videos with the great drama you will hear today. When I was 15 years old, I had this strange, vivid dream. I was lying in the back of a car, staring up through the window, and this woman walked by. She stopped, looked down at me, and smiled. It was one of those dreams that felt so real, so vivid, but like most dreams, it faded when I woke up. I didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't the kind of thing that seemed important. It was just a random, weird moment in my mind that I chalked up to teenage hormones or whatever. Fast forward 2 years later, and I find myself halfway across the world, studying mechanical engineering in a new country. The whole thing was overwhelming: new culture, new people, new challenges. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. So, by the time I hit my second year of college, I was getting more hands-on with the mechanical side of things. Mechanical engineering isn't all textbooks. It involves a lot of disassembling and reassembling, using your hands to figure out how things work. One of our assignments that year was to disassemble a Mini for parts. The task? Flip it over on its roof and remove the handbrake cable. Sounds simple enough, right? I remember being under that car, fiddling with the cables, when I looked up to check if anyone had finished before me. And then, out of nowhere, I saw her. The woman from my dream. I froze. It was her, same face, same smile, everything. She was standing there, looking down at me, and she smiled. I swear, it felt like time stopped. I tried to shake off the weirdness of it. Was I hallucinating? Was this some bizarre coincidence? I had to pull myself together. I mean, what were the odds of seeing her, the same woman from my dream, in real life, on the other side of the world? But there she was. Just like in the dream. Later that month, we ended up having lunch together in the student cafeteria. I don't know how it happened. It wasn't like we were close friends, but we'd started talking a bit more. I don't remember how we got onto the topic, but at some point, she casually mentioned that when she looked down at me, she had a strange feeling, like she had seen me before. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had to tell her about my dream. I told her about the weird vision I had when I was 15, how I was looking up from the back of a car, and how a woman walked by, stopped, looked down at me, and smiled. She listened quietly, but then, she did something that made my heart skip a beat. She told me she had the same dream. But here's the kicker: she had seen it from the opposite perspective. Instead of me looking up at her, she had been the one looking down at me. It was the exact same scenario, just flipped. I felt this strange rush of chills down my spine. How was that even possible? What were the odds that we'd both had the same dream, from different angles, years before we even met? It felt like the universe was trying to tell me something, but I had no idea what. Over the next few weeks, we started hanging out more. I don't know if it was the dream or just some strange, unexplainable connection between us, but I felt drawn to her. There was something about her laugh, the way she made even the most mundane things seem interesting, the way she had this energy about her that felt familiar, like I'd known her forever. But there was also this undercurrent of tension. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. The way she would sometimes look at me, like she was searching for something in me, or the way our conversations would occasionally feel too intense, too loaded with unspoken words. I tried to ignore it, but it was always there, lurking beneath the surface. It was hard to tell if she felt the same way, or if it was just my imagination running wild. After all, we had both experienced this dream, right? Maybe it was just some kind of shared experience, nothing more. But deep down, I started to wonder if there was something more to it. Something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something unsettling. Little did I know, the dream was just the beginning of a much deeper, more complicated story. One evening, we were studying together in the library. She had asked me to help her with some mechanical engineering concepts she was struggling with, and we were sitting close, both leaning over a textbook, our fingers brushing occasionally. It felt intimate in a way I wasn't used to with someone I wasn't romantically involved with. As we worked, she suddenly stopped and looked up at me, her face serious. "Do you ever feel like there's something between us?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. I was caught off guard. Was she really asking what I thought she was asking? My heart raced, but I didn't know how to respond. It wasn't that I didn't feel something, I did, more than I was willing to admit to myself, but this wasn't how I'd imagined it happening. It was all too fast, too confusing. I could feel the tension building in the air, and then she said something that completely threw me off balance. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she added, her voice dropping slightly. "Someone I thought I'd never see again." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Was she talking about her past? Or was there more to this than I understood? I tried to play it cool, but the words lingered in the air, unanswered. My stomach twisted with the strange feeling that maybe I had missed something important. And somehow, I knew that whatever came next, it wasn't going to be as simple as I had hoped. A few days later, I met her at the same cafeteria where we'd first talked about the dream. She seemed more distant than usual, quieter. I asked if everything was okay, and for a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, she finally spoke. "I've been thinking about something," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Something I haven't told you. It's about the dream." I felt my heart skip. I hadn't expected her to bring it up again. But she wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes were serious, almost as if she were preparing to say something she had been hiding for a long time. "I didn't tell you everything before," she continued, looking away as if searching for the right words. "The truth is, I've seen you before. Before the dream." Now, I was completely confused. My mind was racing. "What do you mean? You've seen me before?" I asked, trying to make sense of what she was saying. She took a deep breath, her hands clenched tightly in front of her. "When I was younger, I used to visit a friend who lived in the same neighborhood as you. I saw you a few times, walking around, just like you were in that dream. I never really thought much of it back then, but the dream, it made me realize something. There's this weird connection I can't explain." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. She had seen me, or someone like me, before we ever met. The implications were mind-boggling. How was that even possible? Had we somehow crossed paths without knowing it? Or was there something more going on here? My mind raced, and the weight of it all started to sink in. I wasn't sure how to feel. Was this just coincidence? Or was something deeper at play? After her confession, things between us began to shift. It wasn't immediate, but there was an undeniable change in the air. The connection we had felt more intense, but also more complicated. It was like we were caught between something real and something otherworldly. I found myself thinking about her constantly, about the dream, the strange feelings, the inexplicable connection. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more I realized I couldn't. But there was one thing I could feel for certain: I was drawn to her, just as much as I had been before. Every time she smiled, it was like my heart skipped a beat. I would catch myself staring at her sometimes, wondering if she could sense the same pull that I felt. She'd often look at me in those quiet moments, her eyes searching mine, and I felt like there was something unspoken between us, something neither of us fully understood. One evening, she invited me to a small gathering at her place. It was casual, just a few friends from class, but there was this tension between us that neither of us could ignore. When everyone else had left, we were sitting together on her couch, and for a moment, the whole world felt like it had shrunk down to just the two of us. She looked at me, and in that instant, I thought she might kiss me. But instead, she said, "You know, sometimes I feel like we're on the verge of something, but I'm not sure I'm ready to understand it." Her words hit me like a cold splash of water. It felt like she was pulling away, and yet, I couldn't deny that I felt the same way. There was something deeply unsettling about our connection, something that made me question if we were even meant to be friends, let alone something more. But then, just as quickly as the moment had started, she got up, smiled faintly, and said, "Maybe we're not supposed to figure it out, at least not yet." And just like that, the air between us shifted again, more distant, more unsure, and definitely more complicated. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was like the dream had been a prelude to this deeper, more confusing story. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, her words, her eyes, the way she had pulled away right at the moment when I thought we might finally understand what was happening between us. The next few weeks felt like a blur. We still talked, but it wasn't the same. There was a tension that neither of us acknowledged, but it was there, thick and heavy. When we saw each other, it was like walking around on eggshells. Small talk, awkward silences, and glances that felt loaded with things left unsaid. I tried to focus on school, to push everything else out of my mind, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more it consumed me. I started to notice how often I would catch her looking at me from across the room, her expression unreadable, like she was trying to decide whether to say something or just let the silence hang there. Every time our paths crossed, it felt like we were teetering on the edge of something big, something that could change everything. But then came a moment that I wasn't prepared for. One evening, out of nowhere, she sent me a message asking if I could meet her at a nearby park. The urgency in her text caught me off guard, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. Something I wasn't ready for. I agreed, of course, not knowing what to expect. When I arrived, she was sitting on a bench, staring off into the distance. I walked up, and without turning to look at me, she said quietly, "I think it's time we talk about what's really going on." Her words felt like a bombshell. It was like everything had been building to this moment, and now, it was finally about to explode. I sat down beside her, my mind racing. I had no idea what she was about to say, but the tension between us had been building for so long, I knew this moment would change everything. She took a deep breath before finally looking at me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "I've been lying to you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "About something important. Something I should have told you a long time ago." My heart sank. The air around us felt suffocating, and I couldn't find the right words to say. The dream, the connection, everything had seemed so strange, yet meaningful. Was she about to tell me it was all just a coincidence? Or was there something darker going on? She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The truth is, I've known you longer than you think. I didn't just see you in my dream. I saw you, in real life. Years ago." My mind went blank. "What do you mean?" I asked, barely able to form the words. She hesitated, then told me something that hit me like a ton of bricks. She had been a part of a group I was unknowingly connected to, a group of people who had been tracking certain events in their lives, events that involved me. She had seen me at a younger age, before we ever met, and had been instructed to keep her distance. But then the dream happened, and everything started to fall into place. "I wasn't supposed to get close to you," she confessed. "But I couldn't help myself. And now I think I've ruined everything." I sat there, stunned. All this time, I thought we were connected by something mystical, something out of the ordinary. But it turned out there was a much darker, more complicated truth beneath it all, something I hadn't even begun to understand. This wasn't just a case of coincidence or fate. It was manipulation. And worse, she had been part of it. The betrayal hit me like a wave. I couldn't process what she had just told me. My mind was spinning, and I felt like the ground beneath me had been ripped away. The silence between us was suffocating. I could hear the distant sound of children playing in the park, the rustling of leaves in the wind, but it all felt so far away, like I was trapped in a bubble of confusion and disbelief. I couldn't even look at her. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, and I could feel my chest tightening with anger, hurt, and betrayal. "I don't understand," I finally managed to say, my voice strained. "Why would you do that? Why would you get involved in something like that?" She shifted uncomfortably, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "I didn't have a choice. They made me do it. I was told to watch you, to keep tabs on you, but when I saw you in the dream, everything changed. I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted any of this." Her words were like a punch to the gut. The realization that I had been a part of some bigger scheme, something I didn't even know about, made my blood boil. It felt like everything I had thought I understood about her, about us, was a lie. I stood up, feeling the anger rise inside me. "So what now? What happens to us? What happens to me?" She stood too, her eyes pleading. I never meant for it to get this far. But I can't undo what's been done. I don't know what to do now. I took a step back, my mind racing. I couldn't stay in this web of lies, manipulation, and confusion. But I couldn't just walk away either. I had been caught in something I didn't ask for, and now, it seemed like there was no way out. Maybe it's better if we don't see each other anymore, I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Maybe that's the only way for me to move on. I turned and started to walk away, but her voice stopped me. Please, don't hate me. But it was too late. In that moment, all I felt was betrayal. And I didn't know if I could ever forgive her or myself for letting it get this far. The days that followed were a blur. I threw myself into my studies, trying to drown out the noise in my head, but nothing seemed to make sense anymore. Every time I looked up from my textbooks, her face flashed in my mind, and every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear her voice, pleading with me not to hate her. But the truth was, I didn't know what I felt anymore. Was I angry? Yes. Betrayed? Absolutely. But I also felt something else, something I couldn't quite name. Part of me wanted to understand why she did what she did, but another part of me felt like I couldn't afford to get any closer to that truth. The whole situation had been a lie from the start, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had been playing a part in something much bigger than I had ever imagined. I started avoiding her. Not out of malice, but because I couldn't trust myself around her. Every time she came near, I felt the weight of everything I had learned crushing down on me. It was like I was living in two different worlds, the one where we had been friends, where we had shared something deep and strange, and the one where she had betrayed me, where I couldn't even look at her without feeling sick. But even though I avoided her, she didn't give up. She'd send me messages, texts apologizing, explaining, begging me to listen. Sometimes I'd see her walking across campus, and I could feel her eyes on me, the sadness in them palpable from a distance. It killed me to ignore her, but I had to. I needed space to figure out what had just happened, to make sense of everything. One night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the messages she had sent me. They were full of apologies, but they didn't make the hurt go away. She had been a part of something that violated every trust one had ever known. I couldn't just let that slide. It was then that I realized something important. This wasn't just about her. It was about me too. About how I let myself get pulled into a situation I didn't understand, how I ignored the warning signs, and how I let my emotions cloud my judgment. I had to take responsibility for my part in all of this. But that didn't mean I was ready to forgive her. Not yet. As time went on, I started to distance myself more, not just from her, but from everything that reminded me of her. The dream, the connection, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, we were supposed to be together in some strange, cosmic way, it all started to fade into the background. The more I distanced myself, the more I realized how much I had changed since meeting her. I had learned something hard and painful, but something important too. It wasn't about waiting for the answers to all the mysteries life threw at you. Sometimes, you just had to let go and move forward, no matter how uncertain the future seemed. And so, I did. I walked away from the past and tried to make peace with it. But I knew one thing for sure, I would never look at dreams, connections, or people the same way again. It's funny how life works sometimes. You go through something that shakes you to your core, and in the middle of the mess, it feels like the world is crumbling around you. But then, with time, you start to see things more clearly, and the pieces that didn't fit before somehow start to make sense. At least, that's what happened to me. After everything with her, I threw myself into my studies even more, just trying to focus on anything that could distract me from the weight of the past. But over time, I started to realize something. I was no longer the person I was before I met her. Something had changed in me, not because of the betrayal, but because I had learned to trust my instincts, to pay attention to the warning signs I'd ignored, and to take ownership of my own choices. I had spent so long blaming her for what had happened that I failed to see how much responsibility I carried in the situation. Yes, she had betrayed me, but I had let myself get swept up in it. I had ignored the red flags and, in doing so, allowed myself to get too close. I couldn't keep blaming her for my own actions, no matter how painful the truth was. As much as I hated to admit it, this experience had forced me to grow. And while I hadn't wanted to go through the pain, I could see now that I had to, in order to become the person I needed to be. It wasn't just about moving on, it was about learning from the past so I didn't repeat the same mistakes in the future. I still thought about her from time to time, but it wasn't the same. The anger had faded, and the sadness had transformed into something more like acceptance. I had to let it go, and that was the hardest part of all. One evening, I received a message from her. It was simple, just a text asking how I was doing. I didn't know why she was reaching out again, but I didn't want to be angry anymore. I didn't need her in my life, but I also didn't want to hold on to that bitterness any longer. I sat there for a long time, staring at the message. I thought about what I had learned, about trust, about forgiveness, and about knowing when to let go. And so, I replied. I'm doing okay. I'm moving on, just like I think we both need to. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a declaration of forgiveness, but it was something I had to say. I had to make peace with the past, not for her, but for me. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't get one. But that was okay. In that moment, I realized that I had finally taken control of my own story. And that was the most important thing I could do. So, I moved forward. And though I still thought about her, the weight of what had happened no longer held me back. I had learned to trust myself, and that was a lesson I'd carry with me forever. But, if there's one piece of advice I could give anyone who's been through something like this, it's this: trust your instincts. Don't let yourself get swept up in things you don't understand, and don't be afraid to walk away when something doesn't feel right. You deserve peace, and sometimes that means leaving things behind, no matter how difficult it is. And that's exactly what I did. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. Not in any dramatic way, but just by living it. I didn't rush into anything or force myself to feel something I wasn't ready for. I took it one day at a time, letting the lessons from the past sink in without clinging to them too tightly. I still thought about her, but it was less frequent. At first, every thought about her felt like a reminder of the betrayal, a reminder of the dream that had led me into a tangled mess. But over time, those thoughts softened. I realized that she wasn't the problem, I was the one who had let myself become too entangled in something that wasn't meant to be. And once I understood that, I was able to forgive myself. It was like I had to go through this process of self-reflection and healing before I could fully let go. I started to see the relationship, and the experience, in a new light. It wasn't about the dream. It wasn't about some cosmic connection. It was about trust. It was about knowing when to walk away and trusting myself enough to do it. I had moments where I doubted my decisions, where I wondered if I had acted too hastily. Maybe I could have handled things differently. Maybe there was a way to salvage what we had. But as I grew, as I learned more about myself and the world around me, I realized that walking away was the right choice. I had been through too much to just settle for something that didn't feel right. Looking back, I can see how important this experience was. It wasn't just a chapter in a story, it was a defining moment. It taught me that I can't control everything that happens in my life. People will come and go. Dreams will fade. But what I can control is how I respond to these events. And in the end, that's all that matters. I also started to understand something else, that trust isn't just about the other person. It's about me. It's about trusting my own judgment, my own instincts. It's about knowing when to let go and when to hold on. And the more I learned to trust myself, the less I needed anyone else's validation. That, in itself, was freeing. Eventually, I found peace. I knew that I had done what I needed to do for my own well-being. I had let go of the anger, the confusion, and the hurt. And in doing so, I had created space for something better, something more genuine and lasting. To anyone reading this, if you're in a situation where you feel lost, or betrayed, or just stuck in something you don't understand, my advice to you is simple: trust yourself. Trust your instincts. And if something feels wrong, if it doesn't sit right in your gut, don't be afraid to walk away. The world will always present challenges, but it's how we face them, how we respond, that shapes our lives. And with that, I move forward, no longer holding on to the past, no longer haunted by dreams or regrets, but looking ahead to what lies next. As I continued to navigate through life, I began to notice something I hadn't before. The scars from that experience weren't just fading, they were transforming into something stronger. I wasn't the same person I had been before I met her, before the dream, the betrayal, and all the confusion. But that was okay. I wasn't supposed to stay the same. Growth is messy, and sometimes it's painful, but it's also what makes us who we are. In the beginning, I felt like I had to avoid any connection that could bring back the same sense of betrayal. I thought if I kept my distance from everyone, I wouldn't risk feeling that hurt again. But I soon realized that closing myself off wasn't the answer. What I needed wasn't distance from people, but trust in myself. I needed to be able to open up to others, to give myself the space to experience joy and connection without the fear of being hurt. It wasn't easy, though. The past had a way of creeping in at the most unexpected times, reminding me of the pain, of what I had lost. But I found strength in those moments, too. Every time I felt that old hurt resurface, I would remind myself that I had survived it. I had learned from it. I wasn't going to let it control me anymore. One of the hardest lessons I learned was that healing isn't linear. There were days when I felt strong, confident, and ready to take on the world. And then there were days when the memories would hit, and I would wonder if I was ever truly going to get over it. But I came to accept that those ups and downs were part of the process. Healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about learning to live with it, to accept that it had shaped me into who I had become, for better or for worse. I began to forgive her, not because she had earned it, but because I needed to let go of the weight I had been carrying. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened or pretending that it didn't matter. It was about freeing myself from the chains of resentment, about accepting that people make mistakes, and that I couldn't keep letting her actions define my happiness. And as I let go of that anger, I felt lighter. The future no longer seemed like something to fear, something to avoid. It became something I could embrace with open arms, ready to face whatever came next. Part 15, Moving On and What I've Learned. The hardest part, though, wasn't about forgiving her or understanding what had happened. It was about trusting myself again. I had been so caught up in that dream, in the idea of some deeper connection, that I had let my guard down. But I learned that while it's okay to trust people, it's even more important to trust yourself. To listen to your gut when something feels off, and not to let the hope of something grand override your common sense. I also learned that life is unpredictable. Sometimes, things will happen that don't make sense, that you can't explain. And that's okay. We're not meant to have all the answers. What matters is how we respond, how we learn, and how we move forward. As for me, I'm still figuring things out. I'm still learning and growing, and I'll probably make mistakes along the way. But I know one thing for sure, I'm stronger than I was before. And I trust myself more than I ever have. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone who's been through a betrayal or something that left you questioning everything, it's this: don't let your past define you. Don't let your mistakes or the mistakes of others keep you from moving forward. Learn from them. Grow from them. And most importantly, trust yourself. You'll get through it. And when you do, you'll realize that the most important connection you'll ever have is with yourself. So, here I am, looking forward to whatever life has in store. The past doesn't define me anymore. It's just a part of the journey, not the end. And I'm ready for the next chapter. And that's it. Thanks for reading.